This is Honors Geometry Lesson 3.6, Theorems about Perpendicular Lines. First theorem we're going to talk about, it says if two lines intersect to form a linear pair of congruent angles, then the lines have to be perpendicular. So let me show you what that means. So we have a linear pair of angles, that's right here, and they're saying those two angles are congruent. So we know a linear pair of angles has to add up to 180 degrees. And if they're also congruent, we know that each of those would have to be 90, therefore the lines are perpendicular. Second one says if two lines are perpendicular, then they intersect to form right angles. So if you're given that lines are perpendicular, you can assume that all four of those angles are going to be right angles or 90 degrees. The last one says if two sides of two adjacent acute angles are perpendicular, then the angles are complementary. So what they're saying is two sides of two adjacent acute angles are perpendicular like that, then you know that those two angles together have to give you 90 degrees. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and prove that. So we're given that rays ED and EF are perpendicular. This upside down capital T, that's the symbol for perpendicular. And if you see that, that's as good as a vocabulary word. So you know we're going to use definition of perpendicular in this proof somewhere. The symbol for parallel looks like an 11. And again, if you see that in a proof, you can use definition of parallel. So here we go. We're given that ray AD is perpendicular to ray EF. Of course, that's our given statement. Next step down says that we now know that angle DEF is a right angle. That's what perpendicular says. Perpendicular says they intersect to form right angles. So I'm going to use definition of perpendicular. Now it says if I know that that angle is a right angle, I can also say it equals 90 degrees. That's from definition of right angle. Definition of right angle says the measure equals 90 degrees. Definition of right angle. Now they're saying if I add angles 7 and 8 together, I get the whole thing. And we know what it means. If you add two little angles together to get a big angle, we call that angle addition. Angle addition postulate. Now what they did is they replaced the measure of DEF with 90 degrees, because right here we said DEF is equal to 90 degrees. Anytime in math when we replace something, that's called substitution. And the last step, we said, hey, we know if they have a sum of 90 degrees, we're allowed to call that complementary. That's what complementary means. So we're going to say that's definition of complementary says that they have a sum of 90 degrees. All right, now we're going to practice. So again, here we have two adjacent angles and they're formed by perpendicular lines or rays, so we can assume they equal 90 degrees. So we're simply going to say that x plus 14 plus 63 is going to give us that 90 we're looking for. I'm going to combine my like terms, so that's what 77 equals 90, subtract 77 from each side. It looks like the value of x is going to be 13. Let's look at a couple more theorems. Next theorem says that if a transversal is perpendicular to one of two parallel lines, then it has to be perpendicular to the other one. So let's see what that looks like. So you have a set of parallel lines, and the way we mark parallel lines in geometry is we use those arrows. So as soon as you see that, you can assume the lines are parallel. So it's saying if it's perpendicular, this transversal is perpendicular to the first parallel line, you can assume it's also perpendicular to the second line. The next theorem, it says if two lines are perpendicular to the same line, so we're given two lines and they're perpendicular to the same line, now we're allowed to assume that those two lines are parallel. So it's the converse of the first theorem. Let's go ahead and solve a little puzzle. So we're find the missing angles 1 to 5. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to see 1 and 5 are vertical angles, so I can assume that 5 is also 90 degrees. We're given that 1 is a 90 degree angle. I also know that these two angles have to add up to 90 degrees, so I take 90 minus 30. That means angle 2 has to be 60 degrees. I can see that this 30-degree angle and this angle are vertical angles. They're across from each other in an X, so I'm allowed to assume that angle 3 is 30 degrees. And the last one we have left, we know that these three angles together have to equal 90 degrees. I have a 30 plus a 40, that's 70. So if I take 90 minus the 70, I know that angle 4 must be 20 degrees. Please try the practice problems. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.